And away we go.
And away we go.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of Zelf on the Shelf. Today I'm joined by longtime friend of the channel, Mr. Alex Crandall.
First time caller.
Who better to discuss the business model of the LDS Church than an actual business model?
Go on.
So Alex is a UCLA MBA student.
It's a mouthful, and it does rhyme though, at least, so.
I should throw in a few more letters just for
I
fun.
should, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a YSA, BSA,
Yeah, sometimes I CYA, EFY, you know, just the usual shit.
Yeah. So, anything you want to tell us about yourself? You're also ex-Mormon.
Sure, yeah. So ex-Mormon left the church, I don't know, about 9 years ago. I'll get into a little bit more about, like, what kind of drove my departure, but, yeah, a little bit about me. Right now I'm in LA and I work in music, like in a big music instrument company in like marketing, and I'm an MBA student, as you were saying, at UCLA. So I've been like reading a lot about business lately, and this has been kind of a topic that has come to mind a lot, is looking at the church through a very practical business lens. Just there's a lot of parallels, and so I don't know, yeah, we were shooting the shit earlier and thought, why don't we just record some of this?
Alex is one of my friends who every time we start talking is like, oh, we should be recording this.
Yeah.
This should be content. Also just one of my most intelligent and talented and kind friends. So
okay, the Venmo's still sending, by the way. It'll be there soon.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, is please could you just hurry up with that.
Yeah, and don't forget to like and subscribe on Patreon, okay? And keep this channel going.
Yeah, long-time patron.
Absolutely. You got to get that exclusive content, you know?
Yeah, and then you end up making the exclusive content. Just kidding, this one's for everybody.
Hello.
All right, well, let's tell, you're driving the train on this one.
All right, cool. Well, when you break down, like, the church is a business, right? Like, and we know that.
And a very successful
business. When you look at their finances, they're really not like any other church. And so I think that kind of gives a lot to kind of dive into about what separates them from other churches, and also why are they different from other businesses? And like, so what are the similarities? What are the differences? And like, also, how does that affect members day to day, as well as like the larger public? Because like businesses always have a public front. There's a product and there's a customer, and how you connect those things and how you keep that product viable. Those are all parts of the decisions that businesses make day to day, and well, the church makes those decisions. So it's just always wrapped in a different layer. It's just it's like a veneer of this, you know, religiosity, and so sometimes, like, I think obscures exactly how functional it is, and just like financially driven and all these things. So I know that's kind of like the foundation.
So a little background about you. You were going to tell us a little bit about your exit.
Yeah, well, so that's a good segue into the product of the church, right? Like, what does the church even provide as a service, and how is it different from, say, other mainstream religions? So like the first thing I think of is like the life cycle of an average member. What is like the track that they set you on, right? So you're born, say you're an average born in the covenant member. You're born, you get immediately put onto the rolls as a member, but you're not paying your dues yet. You haven't earned any money quite yet, though. I don't know, did you get those little like piggy banks, the little jars you get at Deseret Book or something?
Yes. And
they were like, had a little tithing thing, and so very early on you're getting primed. If we were using like a marketing term, you're getting primed for this. But then you get up into baptism, and now you're like
at the mature age of 8 years old, you're totally capable and fit to be making such lifelong binding agreements.
I think that's like it's pretty much a global standard for like having autonomy, and like clearly, your brains are fully developed.
The neuroscience will catch up.
You still believe in Santa. You're gonna make lifelong commitments and be financially obligated forever. Yeah, it's cool.
No, Santa was a lie. The person who's actually watching all of your moves and chalking you up to be on the good list or the naughty list and will bless you accordingly is actually Jesus. Different bearded hero.
Layers, it's onions.
Yeah.
It's like you peel it all back. There's always somebody. But Santa. So like you get baptized. Okay, cool. And then they slowly start to parcel out a little bit more access, a little bit more, but you're still not contributing much as a customer, right? I mean, you don't make much money as a kid for the most part. So all of these things, they're token gestures. When you give your $5 and you go to, what do they call it now? It's not tithing settlement. They just changed it. Tithing declaration. They changed the verbiage. Did you hear this? This is
I
a big
declare
prophecy.
tithing.
Yeah. Michael Scott School of Prophecy. No!
I want to see that alternate timeline,
I
Michael.
know. Yeah, that's... Have you ever heard of the Peter principle? It's like where you rise to the level of incompetence. Michael could rise to the level of incompetent prophet, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
As long as he pays dues.
Yeah, it's all about just being, dedicated, right? So
I definitely want that spin-off now. This has got to happen. I'll call Mike Schur. But yeah, it's just like you go to your tithing declaration or tithing settlement every year, but it's these token things to prime you into adulthood, right? And so and they also start to parcel out a little bit of like the power too. If you're a man and you have a penis, then you get to like do the cool things.
You got more authority than the Pope at that point.
Yeah, exactly. But still, they haven't like gotten any returns on you yet as a customer, right? But then you get adulthood, right? And you start to get a career, you start to have income, and you fulfill this path of getting to the point of getting married in the temple and having children. So that's like, I always see that as like, that's the track of the main product, is getting to that temple ceiling and having kids, and then you become like, because the eternal salvation is the ultimate angle, right? That's what they're selling us. Then you get to pay for that for the rest of your life. So it's like, it's this investment period of childhood, and then they also lock you in by making future members right off the bat, so future customers. And then you just get to pay dues for this really shitty club forever, I always think of like the temple as like a really bad Netflix. It has like 1 or 2 movies, like 2 variations. You pay 10% of your money and you get to go cosplay and watch it like a Rocky Horror Picture Show.
But imagine movie night in the Disney castle temple of your dreams.
It is. It's fantastical. Yeah. Well, and then they sell that on you too, right? That's all part of like the glamour and the imagery of it. But yeah, like that's Mormonism in a nutshell, right? And so then...
And at this point, to a Mormon, they're like, yeah,
cool.
That's the whole point. Eternal families. We
Yeah.
get to the temple. That's what we're building up to. Yes, so we can do this forever.
Yeah.
So what's the problem? Why is it a problem if the church is a business, and how does that business continue to function, and how it relates to the membership, who are, in your opinion, products of the whole?
Yeah. Well,
the product, the consumer,
we're literally the labor and the end consumer. It's pretty crazy.
Right. Because they do cash in at your mission.
Yeah, they do.
That's when you really start.
Well, yeah, and that brings up a great point is, when you're in the church like this, in an average Christian church, you don't have to do all of these works. I don't know if you've been to other Christian churches, for example, but like there's this thing called like grace and like getting saved, which is like
after all we can do, right?
And that's the Mormon hook. Is like it's got to be the works. And so the way I see that is, after you did this normal track, which to an average like church is just like, it's just part and parcel of living. Like it's less packaged, it's less of we're selling you this thing for this end goal. It's more like you just participate and you're already saved by, Jesus or whatever. So like, cool, congrats, good. And so there's a lot less of incentive for future participation. But where the church got really clever is by creating all of this subsequent follow-on content that you need to consume or you need to participate in to secure like the salvation, to keep yourself in. And so like that's the hook. That's so unique to Mormonism. I can't really think of other religions that have that same type of like real pull of saying you cannot ever let off the gas. We even make the catchphrase "endure to the end" as part of the covenant path now. Is literally you have to do this forever, and if you let off at any point, well then you're gonna jeopardize the entire investment.
There goes your whole afterlife insurance plan.
I know, right? Yeah, it's like
you're gonna lose a lot of perks.
A lot of perks. Well, you're gonna lose your seat at the family dinner table of Chuckarama or whatever.
Travel rights. You lose your intergalactic passport.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I've always wanted to make planets. Like that was really appealing. Did you ever have any like zany planet ideas?
I didn't get too caught up in that. I was like, I guess we'll all be polygamous, I guess.
Oh, okay. Polygamous leader Tanner.
I wasn't like too like gung ho about it. That's one we were talking about that earlier. How it's lent itself to a lot of world building in Mormon creative outlet.
Yeah.
But I never got too hung up on it, though. I liked If You Could Hide a Kolob. That was probably my stretching in that direction.
When they say there is no end to race, they just mean like running, right?
Yeah.
It's not racist
Endure
at all,
to the
guys.
end of the race.
Yeah, not since 1978. It's been cool. We're all cool now. Just don't look up Eliza Snow either.
No, I wouldn't do that if I were you. A lot of things I wouldn't look up if I were a believing Mormon.
But yeah, it's honestly like a video game. I don't know how many video games you played or anyone watching's played many video games, but like if you're playing like Warcraft or some shit, like you level up a character, you get to like your max level, and if you have nothing else to do, you do get bored and you check out. But if you have lots of things that you have to constantly do to get slightly better, you do that, and they incentivize it. There's all these, motivation behavior about like they have these rewards for participation too in the church. So if you're active and you're doing these things, you get recognition and you get social status within your community and clout, and you get the right callings and all these things. And so they motivate you to constantly, again, continue to progress in this product, even though there's really nothing new to any of it. Which is why you can talk to, like you're still going to Sunday school and reading the exact same correlated materials for the last like 5 decades if you're, an older member. What are you getting out of that at that point, nothing. But
it seems like correlation does kind of go hand in hand with the church emphasizing and restructuring as a business.
Yeah.
The corporatization of Mormonism, the theological aspect of that is like correlation.
Yeah. Who was that homeboy who did all the investments around the 50s and then...
Was it Henry D. Moyle?
Yeah, it was Moyle. Moyle's the guy. I knew you would know.
Henry D. Moyle.
Does he have a song about... Oh, and you can call him Queen Bee. Didn't realize he had a theme song, but I love that. Yeah, it was around that time that they finally got savvy, right? And then that's what also... Newsflash, that's when they closed all the finances, so nobody could see it. So they shut the books, and then suddenly they made all these key investments. They bought all that Hawaii property, they bought the Florida and the Texas property, they correlated all their, so that's a great example of franchising, right? You think about like, when you go to a McDonald's, you know what to expect. No matter where you are pretty much in the world, there's going to be similarities in both the quality, which is but like you know what you're getting for. You're gonna get cheap food and a predictable menu and all these things. That's what the church did, and like
the American dream.
Yeah, come on.
Taste
I mean, how many testimony meetings did you get too, where people like go up and they speak and they're like, "I went to church in London and it's like I never left Utah. Like it was so beautiful." Or, oh, God forbid, when people like go to Italy for the first time and they spend 2 days at the temple in Rome now. It's like, okay, we could see actual art and historical stuff, or we can go to McDonald's, the equivalent of it, having Sbarro's in New York Times type of meal. Just like nothing special. And part of the perk is like, it's just like what I'm familiar with, right?
I can travel without having to experience anything new. Win, win, win.
Win, win, win. Yeah, it's a brilliant example of like, as a business, how you franchise the model. It's all part of the same program. So... yeah, at the end of the day, Mormonism, I think one of that big unique points is that they were able to create, and I don't think this is intentional too, I think we can talk about this too, but like I think it's almost like a natural byproduct of just dialing in the best way to keep people active. But I think more than almost any other mainstream Christian type church, they're able to really incentivize constant participation. They dangle this eternal salvation and, your eternal family, which is, I mean, a more nefarious look is like they hold them hostage, right? But
totally.
They say, and if you pay with your life and obedience and participation and your money, then you get these things.
2 years of a grueling volunteer marketing program.
Yeah. Ugh. And that yeah, that's another great point. So how does the church even sell this stuff to us, right? Who is the customer when we go on a mission?
I think they say it. They're like, it's the missionary, right?
Yeah.
They know that.
It's all about being converted.
Now, I wonder if that'll change with so many people leaving the missions and leaving the church after the mission when they were like, whoa, that was not what they pitched to me.
Yeah, I think we're getting a lot of that more and more, like you lose the social incentive because as more people leave, you lose critical mass. So if we were using, again, like businessy terms to talk about market adoption, when you were like neck deep in like peak Mormon culture, which to me is probably like 90s to 2000s, I think that's like when the growth was the highest everyone was riding this like Gordon B. Hinckley train, and the temple growth was explosive, and it really did feel like, oh wow, this stone uncut is rolling across the earth. They had the sesquicentennial celebration of getting Utah, like, I don't know, things, and maybe that's just my nostalgia lens of like my childhood, but it does seem like that was when there was a good confluence of a lot, like a surge in membership and popularity, and we had gotten past the racism, and the Olympics were, you know, there, and it was the Mormon moment. And so, like, at that time, socially, it was really hard to ever leave. But things are a lot more tepid these days in the church. And so that social pressure to keep you in is also diminished. And so I think to that point, as a missionary, suddenly you're starting to wonder, like, do I actually need to still do this? Can I, you know, you kind of like wake up to it.
And earlier you were talking to me about viewing, again, the missionary being the focus of the effort and the conversion in creating a long-term consumer of this product, who's creating more consumers of the product.
The MLM of it all.
But you can kind of see the way that the church emphasizes that. Like, when I was a missionary in Brazil, I thought it was interesting that, like, the buildings there, for instance, weren't as nice as the buildings in the United States, and I thought it would be even cheaper to build the same nice building here as it would be to build one here, where, you know, property values are higher and materials cost more and blah, 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 blah. But it comes down to the fact that it's because they're not making their money in those areas. And what they really want to invest in is dotting this landscape with more temples, so that the people around here... We
need one in Ephraim, you know?
We really
need more in Logan.
They can't... They've been working day and night, and there's just so much work to be done.
You gotta.
If you crunch the numbers, how long will it take to do all the names?
Oh, yeah. So, did this once. So we were talking about in the millennium. So what are the threefold mission of the church, right? Is like perfecting the saints and proclaiming the gospel or whatever, and then it's redeeming the dead. And so, like, again, we're talking about that end game product content that they sell to these members. Is like, well, you got to go to the temple because you got to redeem your ancestors. It's absolutely critical. But you think about, like, okay, we're in a terrestrial world. This is the millennium now, so like it's gone up. We've gone up a whole tier, and Jesus is the world leader of a global corporation / theocracy, and it's a perfect theocracy, which again that's the end goal of most religions, is wanting a theocracy. But that's a whole other topic. And you imagine you have the entire resources of this higher level planet, and how many, you know, billions of people who are now participating in the gospel at this point. And if you tried to just like rough estimate how many humans have existed, let's say just for the last 7,000 years, because Mormons are also a young earth creationist church, doctrinally, then like you'd run out of doing all of the endowments and sealings and baptisms within a few decades, easy. Like, and that's at a casual rate. Like, if you wanted to really crank it out, you could do it even faster. It wouldn't be hard.
And then what are we supposed to do for the rest of the millennium? Just
for
relax,
950
focus
years.
on our art.
Heaven forbid.
Honestly, they would hate that.
They would hate it. Yeah.
They don't want you to have fun. The whole thing is to just keep it going.
Yeah.
It's like a self-perpetuation machine.
They
don't want it to end.
Yeah, and people have like identified about this. It's, you know, it's hard to know for sure because the church is so like tight-lipped about this, but they're already recycling names. Like, the same people get rebaptized over and over.
Oh yeah, Hitler alone
has
been baptized.
Which he had the same temple name as me. I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. But yeah, like they get rebaptized 1,000 times, and they just kind of like rotate regions and temples, and nobody really knows because they're all, you know, similar names and a lot of European ancestors from all of the Utah and but like they would run out of it. So they already have run out of it. But yet, what does Nelson do as soon as he gets in power? You know, it's like a power play to show dominance. Is I'm going to announce as many temples as I possibly can, as though that's a useful allocation of funds in this day and age to do this thing that could be done in a millennium in 2 decades, especially when there's like no veil too. You could like talk directly to people. You get everyone's names.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. You know,
You don't even have to do the ones that aren't consenting.
Yeah.
Just get the ones who want to be dunked.
You could skip all of the really offensive times that they, you know, baptized for like Jewish ancestors that died in the Holocaust, even though like all these Jewish organizations have protested and asked us not to. Keep doing it. It's not good.
I love just the numbers game of how many people, because God's plan, the number one default thing going on here is for everyone to have the gospel preached to them, to repent, to be baptized.
Which I honestly always liked. I think I liked that as a religion, that at least they covered that base of like, let's give people the chance, you know, and not just be like, you're screwed because you got, you know, born 2 years too early. Yeah.
But oh shoot, where was I going with that?
Oh shoot.
What was I saying?
I love playing the numbers game.
Oh yeah, of how many people will go through that track when you compare the population of the world, and the vast majority of the people who live on this planet will never have that experience and will just be baptized for the dead.
Yeah.
So it actually seems like God's real plan is for everyone to do whatever they want, and then afterward in the millennium to be like, yeah, dunk me, go for it.
Yeah, get out of jail free card. Yeah.
Like, that's the plan.
Yeah. And you think about God's batting average is really, really abysmal.
Yeah.
Like, it's pathetic how many of his own children he's able to save. Like, we always, like, cry about baby turtles, right? Like, we're all, like, baby turtles on the beach, and they're all just, like, dying and, like, getting picked off by seagulls, and he's like, I'm sorry.
Oh, he walked away from a third of them right off the bat,
Right off the bat.
Just like,
You're dead to me. But, yeah, the numbers don't add up. But when you're talking about, like, the investment in Brazil, for example, and the church's lack of investment in a lot of their international locations, or like not serious investment, it's because again, that is not the real product, not the real customer base. And there's a business term,
like a secondary.
It is, yeah. It's like
target audience.
It's a secondary benefit. It's a segment that they can hit, but really, it's about reinforcing the indoctrination of their core demographic, which is
white conservative, you know?
Americans that with a higher income bracket, right? So there's this term in business and like in marketing called like a LTV or CLV, which is like the customer lifetime value. And there's lots of different ways you can calculate that, but basically, at its fundamentals, how much money you're going to earn from one person minus like the cost of that person. And so like if you look at an average member in Utah that say, you know, family of like 4, and they maybe get to like a 6-figure job, and over the lifetime earnings of that person in tithing, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for the most part, and also additional members that are baked into this intergenerational MLM. And then you look at how much they're going to earn on tithing from poorer parts of the world, it is paltry, and it's not really like worth it to the church from a revenue perspective. And that's why I think there's a low investment in it. It's just not, it doesn't really matter. But the other part of that equation is retention rates. Like that's a huge factor in like how valuable is a member over a lifetime. You know, if 80% of members stayed in for life, that earning is so much higher than like a 50% retention rate. If every year you had a higher like turnover, higher bleed, because getting a new customer is expensive. Like they already invested all this time in you. They gave you the resources, young men's, young women's program. They sent you to EFY or whatever it's called these days. They do all these things with the goal of that future payoff, that tithing subscription model revenue for the rest of your life. So like, if that retention rate starts to plummet, then that really hurts their long-term bottom line, and like that LTV just starts to drop. So if you go on a mission or you send them to Mormon-only church educational schools, well then, if you bump those retention numbers up a little bit, 5%, 10% here, that pays off in billions, over long term, over the whole membership base. And so I think that just shows what the church's true priorities are. It's not really, the humanitarian efforts are internally focused. They're for the members to feel good about it. And the temple building, that's for the members to feel good about it, the rich members, so they stay in and stay participating. You don't really care about external conversions. It's like nice if you win, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
Do you think that they could be, because now so much of their money, probably, I would guess to say more than even tithing, they're making more from their investments.
Absolutely.
So do you think there could be a point where they just don't even really even care about that? It's just like, it's kind of fits into their they have this is classic Mormon to like, well, we win either way. Like, you don't get an answer, that's an answer.
True.
Which is like,
Always win.
they believe that the stone will roll forth from the mountain and fill the whole earth.
Yeah.
While also the church will get smaller and smaller, and the elect shall be deceived,
Yeah.
and at the end it'll just be a few true believers in Christ.
That
So
left
it's like
behind
they want
porn.
it both. So it's like, either way, we're true
Yeah, you
and
win.
the right one.
Yeah.
But could they get to that point where they're just, you know, I mean, I don't want to say that, you know, there's just straggling membership, but they are experiencing a loss as
Huge
never
losses.
before. So will they just get to a point where they're like, we don't care, like, we're raking in money from God knows what they're all involved in, construction schemes where the nephews of the apostles and the brother-in-laws of the apostles get the contracts to build the super nice buildings.
Yeah, isn't that? I think there's like a word for that. I think it's something like laundering.
Those are all connected, by the way. You should look at Michael Quinn's book on church finances, and he shows like the upper echelons are all familially related, and also all the
those old
investment
Utah
companies, all the building companies, all the
Yeah, I'll scratch my back, you scratch mine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great question. What is the long-term end state? And that, going back again to like a business perspective, most businesses have a goal in mind. Either like there's going to be expansion or progress, or there's a cash out, right? And so like if you're like a startup and you've got you got founders and owners like that have a stake in it, and so when you make a bunch of money, that gets put back into like that ownership, and that's where that wealth gets distributed. Or if you have stocks, it goes back to the stockholders as these dividends. The church doesn't have any of that, right? And nobody's actually making that much money off it. Even these, even this like the corruption that's inherent in like all of Utah, for example. Like, we're not talking Bill Gates money. We're not talking anything like that, which they could. I mean, they have over $100 billion just sitting around. Like that, easily that we know of, that could be very liquid, and then they have lots of other assets that they could easily liquidate at any point if they wanted to. So they could cash out at any point and be fine. Or they also wouldn't need tithing revenue. Like, they could absolutely eliminate tithing at this point. Like,
which was the original intention.
Which is the original goal. That was marketed to the members. They're like, well, you just gotta buckle down. And they still talk to these points. I think it was Holland just recently in Africa was hyping up about how, we're not a wealthy church. We're struggling. We're trying to make. Yeah, this is a look at the camera. Like, you got a Jim face to the camera. Like, eye roll. No, you're one of the wealthiest churches. But they could remove all of tithing, because tithing, I think most estimates, they say it was like around $7 billion a year annual revenue in tithing is what people estimate. I mean, it's again hard to know these numbers, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. And a lot of people estimate the church operating costs is maybe like 5 to 7, and actually it's going down. Part of like the pandemic too was consolidating these wards, simplifying the program, because if you have a 2-hour session, then you could fit more wards into a single building, so you can liquidate those buildings, which they have been.
Lower your lighting bill.
Yeah, and they already outsource all the cleaning, right?
Yeah.
So we do that for free. So like their operating costs are not that high. They could already just take the enzyme peak money, for example, all these things that have been leaked over the last few years. They could take that money, and just from the growth, the dividends of that growth per year, they could run the entire church without any membership paying a single dime of tithing. They could run all of the church,
including the auxiliaries, like BYU.
Nothing. They could do more. Honestly, they could. They could run all of CES off of that money. Like if they set it up as an endowment fund, they could just use the returns of annual growth that they would accrue. They could put that right back into the church, and nobody would have to pay for anything. And or they could siphon it off to all these humanitarian efforts.
Which would make sense if you had a plan in mind. There was like, oh yeah, there would be this worthy thing, but they're just like,
no,
holding it, just burying it in the earth.
And that's why I think there's no real strategic leadership in the church when it comes to it. I think they don't know what to do. Like, are you just like waiting for the millennium to come, like some rainy day. Like they are already way beyond ever needing a rainy day.
Waiting for the U.S. dollar to completely obliterate so that you can do something with, you know, like...
Yeah, but even then, that would mean that all their currency is worthless anyway.
That's what I'm saying. It's,
Yeah,
like,
it's like
what you're waiting for the meltdown
Yeah.
to...
And that money's not going to be useful in the millennium, because again, Jesus would be in charge, and there probably wouldn't be commerce like that. You wouldn't need fiat currency. So it's like, what is your goal here? There is none. They just, I think what it is, and this is me being charitable to like the church office building over yonder, is that I think it's just run by a lot of like savvy people who are focused on their little piece of the pie and maximizing that. So yeah, you're talking like operational efficiency, or like, you know, like a lot of the people who came out with Ensign Peak, they didn't know what they were doing in context. They just knew they were supposed to be in charge of this. It was the Lord's money and stuff, and they did the best they could. So they're all think that like they're putting the shoulder to the wheel, they're lifting where they stand, all those metaphors that we use for contributing, magnifying their calling, and but it's rudderless. It's like just accruing wealth for wealth's sake, and nobody has stopped to say like, you know what if we took $100 billion and like made the world a significantly better place? Like what would Jesus do? Like, it's not a stretch, you know, to me at least.
Feed the hungry, clothe the naked,
or like,
liberate the captive.
Yeah, provide medical care to billions of people, and like prophylactic vaccinations, or like anything that you could do that like all of these other like actually really productive humanitarian programs are out there doing. The church could easily come in. I mean, they could come in with more resources than like Bill and Melinda Gates or any of these folks. They have more money than that, and they
pay less in humanitarian effort than Walmart does.
I think I did the math one time of like the self-reported 1.2 billion that Oaks, that was a few years back, but Oaks said, oh, we donated 1.2 billion over the last like 30 years, and he was like hyping himself up. You do the math, that averaged out to like $3 per member per year. That's like as much as I round up at the grocery store. Like, you know, that's what the church provides. And the worst part is like half of those figures too is them putting a price tag on the human labor that the members volunteer. So this isn't the church giving their money. This is the members volunteering at like hurricane relief type stuff. And they say, well, that was worth $100 of labor. And so we just donated $2 million worth of humanitarian aid through the labor of the church, or through like the local bishop food storehouse, which is, it's all a scam. It's all a scam.
Wow. And they run the state. It's great.
And they run the state. So I guess at the end of the day, if I had to just like sum up the church, it's a business without really an end goal in mind. You know, they've created this MLM.
Acquire money.
Yeah, never-ending growth. There is no end to growth. There is no end to revenue, and everything's so corporatized, and we're all just like sitting here trying, like, thinking that the investment is for eternal salvation, but really it's just to add an extra zero in some, you know, portfolio somewhere.
To lay up our treasures where moth and whatever doth corrupt.
Yeah, it's like they took that talent parable so far, and they're like, we need to get all of the talents in the world.
Yeah, he got in trouble for burying his 2 talents, but if we buried all 1 billion talents, then he would be very happy with us.
Who wouldn't be? This is sad.
Yeah. But, you know, it keeps people busy.
It does. It keeps
you can't say it doesn't.
It keeps you occupied, so you never have a chance to think about anything else.
Makes you feel good. Gives you a quick fallback when times get hard, so you can say, but someday I'll have my mansion in heaven. I just can't wait.
Yeah, and every other good thing that happens that you feel in the church, that's just the human experience that the church has taken, commoditized, and sold it back to you in their own very sanitary small package.
Amen. Put that on a t-shirt.
Put it on a t-shirt. Along with a whale.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, for this wonderful information. If you want people to follow you, find out where you're at, you can just show up at my house. And
any old time. Or Alex does an Instagram. It's my Instagram handle. It's real.
It's a little...
I thought it was really funny at the time, and I just have stuck with it.
Alex does an Instagram. Well, I'm sure we'll be seeing you more. If you want to pressure Alex into revivifying our podcast. You can do that in the comments.
We were gonna start one. It was
I need the push. I struggle to do remote stuff because you're normally in California. And
yeah.
I hate phone calls.
Well, it's hard too because it was like early pandemic. We're like, we'll start a podcast, but then literally every other person started a podcast, and I was like, no,
Don't want to be that guy.
I'm derivative.
All right, well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Sign up on Patreon to support the channel. Love you and talk to you soon.
Bye.